Thus far, over 100,000 species of protists have been found, with many more likely undiscovered. As mentioned previously, protists are a catch-all group of eukaryotes that aren't fungi, plants, or animals, so there are a few similarities amongst the different protist groups. Fungi, except yeast, plants, and animals, exhibit true multicellularity, and that all cells are dependent on each other in order to survive. These three groups also exhibit tissue specialization. Protists do have multicellular features, but if multicellular, behave more colonial. Colonial arrangement differs from true multicellularity because the individual cells can survive without the colony. However, the colony provides an advantage of division of labor, which uses resources more efficiently. Single-cell protists are mostly microscopic, with a few large unicellular examples. These protists can have animal-like plasma membranes, plant-like cell walls, and some having glassy silica walls and pellicles. Pellicles are interlocking protein strips below the plasma membrane that offer protection without being too rigid, like cell walls. Protists have a variety of metabolic lifestyles, being either aerobic or anaerobic. Photoautotrophs gather energy from sunlight and carbon from their surroundings. Heterotrophs consume organic material around them, and some heterotrophic protists have a primitive digestive system in which they undergo phagocytosis to bring food in where it joins with a phagolysosome filled with digestive enzymes. Nutrients are kept and waste are expulsed. Here's a video of an amoeba eating 2 paramecium by phagocytosis. Some protists are mixotrophs, being both photoautotrophs and heterotrophs based on the environment and food availability at that time. Most protists are mobile and evolve a variety of ways to achieve taxis, or movement towards or away from a stimulus. Some protists move by a flagellum and hydrostatic movement, moving the cytoplasm to different parts of the organism, such as this euglena. Others, like paramecium, use rows of cilia to propel forward. Amoeboid protists utilize a pseudopod, which is an extension of their plasma membrane. Amoeboid protists have no definitive shape, and for this reason, use pseudopodia not only for movement, but for engulfing food, as shown previously. Protists have a variety of ways to reproduce. Most undergo asexual reproduction in the form of binary fission. Many protists can undergo both asexual and sexual reproduction, such as Spirogyra. Asexual reproduction is useful when the environment is stable and nutrients are plentiful. Sexual reproduction is useful when the environment is unstable, as it allows organisms to genetically change the next generation of organisms to hopefully adapt to these changes. There are times when protists undergo environmental stresses, such as drought, lack of nutrients, or other environmental changes. When that occurs, they can form and desist to protect themselves until times are better again. Protists are found everywhere there is moisture, even snow. Some protists are parasites, such as the causative agent of malaria, Plasmodium, and others simply help to decompose dead and decaying organisms and their waste. Protist life cycles can be quite varied. Some are simple, as binary fission, others require multiple hosts, and still others employ alternation of generations whereby the haploid and diploid life cycles switch. Even though ferns are not protists, they will still employ this lifestyle. So ferns and many protists start off as a diploid zygote, which eventually will develop into what's called the sporophyte stage. Sporophytes then produce sporangia, which undergo meiosis to become spores. Spores grow and develop into gametophytes, and gametophytes are the lifestyle that makes gametes. Some protists produce both on the same gametophyte, and others produce separate gametophytes for each gamete type. Finally, the gametes unite, creating a new zygote, and the cycle starts over all again. Historically, Kingdom Protista was a classification, but new taxonomic and molecular data suggest that this is an outdated idea. Kingdom Protista is likely to be divided into several kingdoms in the coming years. The image and classification of this slide are at best a hypothesis. More research is needed to improve this cladogram. Until then, eukaryotes can be split into 6 supergroups. Supergroups act like subdomains for domain eukarya. Some supergroups contain existing phyla, others are just simply called groups because they've not been completely classified yet. That's because we are awaiting more information before we can put them in their own phyla or in an entirely different phylum altogether. So the 6 groups are Supergroup Archaeplastida, Supergroup Amoebozoa, Supergroup Opisthokonta, Supergroup Rhizaria, Supergroup Chromoalveolata, and finally Supergroup Excavata. Let's get started with Supergroup Archaeplastida. The first supergroup includes protist groups red and green algae. The common ancestor of all land plants also arose out of this supergroup. All members of this group undergo photosynthesis originating by the endosymbiosis of a cyanobacterium. They use alternation of generations to reproduce and can be single or multicellular. Phylums Glaucophyta are a small group that contains peptidoglycan in their cell walls. This suggests a remnant of prokaryotic cells, since prokaryotic cells contain peptidoglycan in their cell walls. Then you have Rhodophyta, or the red algae, which lack flagella and are mostly multicellular and make up many different forms of seaweed. Their cell walls are made up of cellulose, and the red coloration is due to a special pigment called phycoerythrins. This pigment allows red algae to survive much deeper in waters than green and brown algae, in fact, up to about 800 feet in depth. Red algae cell walls contain agarose used to help make gels for gel electrophoresis, a technique used to separate genetic material and identify known from unknown DNA. In addition, for you sushi lovers, nori is a seaweed used to help wrap sushi, the raw fish around the sushi, and other Japanese cuisine, which derives from the genus Pyropia. Also included in supergroup Archaeplastida are 2 green algae groups. So the green algae are collectively made from Chlorophyta and phylum Charophyta. The most common form of algae is the green algae, and this is the group in which plants derive, specifically phylum Charophyta. We will discuss charophytes in more detail when we get to plants. Both green algae and plants have similar chloroplast and similar photosynthetic pigment, such as chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B, etc. They also store their carbohydrates made from photosynthesis into special plastids. Chlorophytes are highly variable in appearance. Chlamydomonas is a single-celled chlorophyte that uses flagella for motion and an eye spot to help detect sunlight. Volvox exhibit colonialism, having anywhere between 500 to 60,000 cells in a single colony. Ulva, or sea lettuce, is a multicellular algae, and Chlorpha is a fern-like algae made of one giant multinucleate cell. The next supergroup is Supergroup Amoebozoa. Amoebozoans are either single-celled or have multicellular stages in their life. They also have pseudopodia for movement and feeding. Group Gymnoamoeba are also known as the Lobos amoeba. These are what you think of when you think of amoebas. They move by pseudopodia and form protective shells called tests during times of stress. Amoeba proteus is a common amoeba found in ponds. Entamoeba histolytica is a parasitic amoeba known to cause gastrointestinal diseases in people. Phylomyxa is a very large multinucleate amoeboid that has lost their mitochondria. ATP production occurs by endosymbiont bacteria instead. The other group are called slime molds, which are not really fungi but are in supergroup Amoebozoa. The fungal-like structure they can take up is thought to be a result of convergent evolution, since both slime molds and fungi reproduce using fruiting bodies and spores. Slime molds can either be plasmodial or cellular. Plasmodial slime molds are large, multinucleate, and slowly moving. Cellular slime molds form when nutrients are plentiful. They also appear as independent amoeboid cells. When food becomes depleted, these cells aggregate into a mass called a slug beginning asexual reproduction. All members of this group, supergroup Ophistoconta, have a single posterior flagellum, meaning a flagellum towards the rear of the organism. One group of Ophistocont protists exists called the choanoflagellates. These flagellums are used for movement and feeding. Choanoflagellates can either be colonial or single-celled. Animals and fungi evolved from a choanoflagellate ancestor. Fungi contain a single group of organisms that move using a flagellum, and sponges, which are in fact animals, have digestive cells called a choanocyte, which resemble living choanoflagellates. All other animals produce sperm, which also has a posterior flagellum for reproduction. Supergroup Rhizaria include amoeboid organisms that produce pseudopodia that are needle or root-like in appearance. Many rhizarians produce protective tests, and rhizarians play a crucial role in carbon capture in the atmosphere. Rhizarians come in three phyla: Foraminifera, or the forams, which are unicellular heterotrophic protists that look like snails due to calcium carbonate tests that they produce. Tests, again, are similar to cysts, that they're a dormant structure. Foram pseudopods move through the pores of the test, allowing for locomotion. Forams make up a large portion of sand in marine and freshwater habitats and act as bioindicators, helping to determine the health of an ecosystem. This group is sensitive to pollution, so their absence is not a good thing. Radiolarians have geometric calcium carbonate tests with silica in them. Radiolarians use the pores to allow pseudopods to capture food. Cercozoans have both naked and shelled forms and can be photosynthetic or heterotrophic. Some members use their needle-like pseudopodia to penetrate and suck nutrients out of other cells. Chromoalveolates are thought to evolve photosynthesis by secondary endosymbiosis, whereby they take up a red algae and is engulfed into the protist, becoming the plastid of this group. Chromoalveolata can be divided into two major groups: alveolates and straminopiles. Alveolates all share ancestry and are named for the alveolus, a membranous sac found below the cell membrane with an unknown function. The three groups of alveolates include phylum Mysozoa, or the dinoflagellates. This group is identified by having armored plates made of cellulose with two flagella used for locomotion. One flagellum moves the organism up and down, and the other encircles the organism, allowing this organism to move by spinning. Dinoflagellates make up a large portion of plankton, which is the microscopic organism that make up food for larger organisms. Some dinoflagellates produce bioluminescence when stressed, making for some stunning displays in the water. Around 20 species of dinoflagellates cause algal blooms which color the water red. These red tides can be dangerous to many organisms as it secretes a toxin that can cause asphyxiation. One species in particular can cause paralytic shellfish syndrome, whereby a person eats affected oysters and clams, thereby poisoning the person. The next group are the apicomplexans, which are named for the apical complex, a structure used to bore into host cells. All members of this group are parasites, with Plasmodium being the most famous example. Plasmodium causes malaria in hundreds of thousands of people annually. Plasmodium reproduce sexually in mosquitoes and then are transmitted to mammals by mosquito bites, whereby the Plasmodium will bore into and destroy red blood cells to asexually reproduce. Ciliophora are known as the ciliates that use rows of cilia for locomotion. Most members are heterotrophic, utilizing special digestive structures to capture food. Many ciliates have a contractile vacuole to regulate water inside the cell. When full, it will expulse the water outwards. The second group of chromoalveolates are the straminopiles, which include photosynthetic marine algae, diatoms, and water molds. All straminopiles possess a hairy flagellum. Phylum Eukaryotic includes the diatoms, brown and golden algae. Diatoms are a single-celled algae with glassy silica cell walls and compose part of the marine plankton. Diatoms can create blooms during times of high nutrient availability, and like rhizarians, they are a big part of carbon capture in our oceans. Golden algae are unicellular but can form colonies. The gold pigments come from carotenoids, which give off a yellow to orange color. Brown algae are marine multicellular algae that are pretty much known as seaweeds. Giant kelp is an example and one of the longest organisms on the planet, growing at a rate of 10 feet per day. This species is being reviewed as a possible food source since it grows so quickly. Like many other algae, brown algae undergo alternation of generations. Phylum Eukaryotic consists of water molds, which are fungal-like in nature, but they have cell walls made with cellulose, not chitin, like in fungi. Most water molds are aquatic, and some can survive in areas with some moisture. They are all non-photosynthetic, either acting as parasites to other organisms or saprobes, which are organisms that grow on dead and decaying matter, similar to fungi. Last group is Supergroup Excavata. Members of this group are asymmetrical and have a feeding groove excavated on one side of the cell. There are two phyla, Metamonada and Euglenozoa. Phylum Metamonada includes two groups. The diplomonads contain rudimentary mitochondria called mitosomes, which do not make ATP but actually metabolize sulfur and iron. Most of these organisms live in anaerobic environments relying solely on glycolysis for ATP production. Diplomonads also have 4 pairs of flagella for locomotion. Giardia lamblia is a parasite known to cause giardiasis by people drinking water with Giardia cysts in them. This results in bloody diarrhea. The parabasalides are named for a parabasal apparatus made of the Golgi body and special cytoskeletal fibers. This group have modified mitochondria that produce a hydrogen gas as a byproduct. Trichomonias vaginalis, which is the cause of STI trichomoniasis, causing asymptomatic infection in men but symptomatic infection in women. This could cause a secondary infection in women, resulting in easier susceptibility to HIV and cause cervical cancer later in life. Trichonympha is a symbiotic organism in the guts of termites that help assist in the digestion of wood cellulose. Phylum Euglenozoa includes euglenoids, which have a variety of lifestyles and metabolisms. All have 2 flagella for locomotion. Euglena is a mixotrophic protist, both consuming other organisms and undergoing photosynthesis. Trypanosoma brucei is a parasitic euglenoid known for causing the blood-borne disease African sleeping sickness. This is transmitted by the tsetse fly. Without treatment, fatigue and a coma could ensue, leading to death. In our next video, we will see the ecology of protists and their relationships to humans.